Hey, welcome viewers to the first theory episode on our channel. In today's episode, I'm going to give you a theory on AngryBirds Space and AngryBirds Star Wars. Today I'm going to show you the clues and evidence that AngryBirds Space is not a separate adventure in space, but a key point in the AngryBirds universe that happened before AngryBirds Star Wars. But before I start to give the evidence to prove this theory, I want you to tell that I'm not the first person to record about this subject. I've already been preceded by two people with this theory, Stanisław and AngryBirds04, both of whom have links in the description and to their channels. Please leave a subscription and a like at these videos. But let me explain why I'm recording this theory, since two people have already expired. Well, my friends, it's been 2.5 years since Stanisław video and a year and 3 months since AngryBird video. And in this time, Rovio gives us in AngryBirds Reloaded a refresh version of AngryBirds Space where they add new chapters. And I would like to point out that in the videos of AngryBird and Stanisław, there is no that much development of this theory. There are only small things to speak. And in this video, I would like to fully explore it, which is why we are getting to it. But let's move on to our theory. Let's start our theory by looking on one of the main characters of AngryBirds Space, Super Red, and of one main character from AngryBirds Star Wars, named Luke Skywalker. In both cases, it's a red. Are we sure? As we know, AngryBirds Star Wars diverges in a plot from AngryBirds and presents a storyline similar to the 4th, 5th and 6th part of the Star Wars saga. But to make sense of our theory, let's first go through the character of Vader, which is the main antagonist of AngryBirds Star Wars, who is the father of Luke Skywalker. But before that, let's find out who is Vader before he became him. In AngryBirds Star Wars 2, which canonically takes place before AngryBirds Star Wars 1, in the Revenge of the Pork on the last level of the pig site, after completing this level, in the cutscene, we can see how after losing to the Obi-Wan, Anakin is defeated and became a Vader. But let's move to the character of the Anakin. First time we can meet him is in the chapter Escape to the Tatooine, which corresponds to the first movie of the Star Wars saga. As in the movie, Jedi meets Anakin as a young slave boy, so in the game it doesn't look like Anakin is near a slave or a young boy. He looks like as an adult bird. So here we have the first difference with the movie and the plot of the game. This indicates to us that AngryBirds Star Wars is not a perfect equivalent, but only modeled on it. But let's move on this theory. On the interval of the future chapters of the game, we learn the fate of the Anakin, Obi-Wan and other characters, but let's skip some threads and go back to the Revenge of the Pork. There, in the 5th level of the porch site, you can see Anakin from episode 3, where we can see his new power instead of the lightsaber. As we can see, his new power attracts and repels enemies later. But let's go back now to the AngryBirds Space. As we know, the plot of the AngryBirds Space is about the birds jumped into the portal after the ice beast to save the eggs. When they come out from the portal, with his help, they got their new powers, including the red. Where we can see in the game, Red can attract Pig using his powers to himself. And now, let's again look at the Anakin power from the 5th part. He also attracts the opponent to himself, but with a stronger force. And he also attracts near him objects and then push everything away from himself. So, what if Anakin from AngryBirds Star Wars 2 is actually distant descendant of Red? I think so, because Super Red has the same color of power as Anakin from the 3rd part. Also, they have the same color of plumage, because in both cases is red. The only thing that distinguishes them is Anakin's hair, because Red hadn't any hair. But I also have explanation for this, as we know that get his powers from the lightning that struck him in the portal and probably passed these powers on the genes to the future descendants. They are also living in the space, so they were affected by the cosmic radiation, which allowed them to probably produce hair, which is why Anakin and later Luke and Leia have hair. And since we are already on Revenge of the Pork, let's go to another plot break between the game and the movie. In the movie, Padme gives birth on the ship where she dies. And in the game, we can see the X in the background behind Obi-Wan and Padme, which means Padme didn't give birth to them somewhere else other than on Mustafar, or maybe even before. But well, not though we have proven the game and the movie aren't 100% the same. Let's move on this theory. Let's move on incongruities, because if we see Anakin being able to attract any objects, why don't we see Luke doing this? Well, in my opinion, Luke doesn't have it yet, because he hasn't grown up with his power. Because he hasn't grown yet into this power. I know that in Star Wars we met him as adult, but they don't tell us in what age Anakin obtained this power. I think if there was a third part of the game, we would see Luke with his new power and probably also color red. But we know that is unlikely to happen. But if isn't a good argument for Star Wars fans that the game and the movie are in different universes, I have another argument for you. As you can see, red power is a color of red, just like Anakin's powers, so Super Red starts the dark side. So, if we already have satisfied the Star Wars fans, let's move to another argument. Let's move on to the Tatooine. Tatooine appears in both of parts of the games, AngryBirds Star Wars 1 and the AngryBirds Star Wars 2. It's a sandy planet, from time to time having few plants. I'm just wondering where the plants came from. In my opinion, Tatooine used to be a planet full of water, but you are probably wondering what this do to this theory. Well, in AngryBirds Space, we can see in the episode Dig Deeper a planet full of water, but it's not typical planet. It's a fish. Strange. It's also strange that the fish has its own gravity. Don't worry, I will explain why this fish has its own gravity in a future episode of this series. But let's go back to this theory. Except for the fish, in these levels we can see also other species like starfish or plants. This indicates to us that due to the fact of the surrounding water, this fish and its own gravity actions and probably other things which unfortunately you can see in the game, has created an ecosystem around this fish and allows various plants and species to develop itself. But let's go back to the theory. As we can see, on this fish, not only starfish are developed, but barnacles also. And barnacles are one of basic species of animals living underwater. They develop in a rather unusual way, but they affect ecosystem very strong. It indicates that some ecosystem was created on it, so as we can see, barnacles and plants. So, as we can see, the life was developing on this planet. Then why do I think that in the future planet dried up and turned into Tatooine? Well, there are two possibilities for this to happen. First one is natural catastrophe caused by the death of the fish and the collapse of the ecosystem that the fish was probably emitting around it. And second one is the action of the pigs, which we can also see in the chapter Dig Deeper. They could have exploited the fish or used some of its natural assets, leading to its death and various tragic consequences for the planet. Probably because the fish sadly come to the end of its life. All the water evaporated, and with this all the plants and animals died, and what remains of these plants and animals turned into sand, what we can see on Tatooine. But wait, there are also plants on Tatooine. In fact, some plants are able to produce seeds that even can survive for many thousand years. But how do we know that this is the definitive type of the plants? Well, according to this theory, we have to assume that some plants must have left behind seeds that survived these extreme conditions, and only once the planet stabilized again, this time to the Tatooine, which is a sandy planet, those seeds finally grow into plants, which we can see on the Tatooine levels. And here I have a fun fact for you. In-game, near this planet, you can actually spot an advertisement for AngryBirds Star Wars 2. More specifically, there's a display showing a Darth Maul right next to it. And between this planet and Red Planet, which is located nearby, you can even see Death Star in some versions of the game. This hints that these two planets might be somehow connected to AngryBirds Star Wars. And you are probably wondering, what planet could the Red Planet have turned into? Well, in my opinion, it's Mustafar. On Red Planet we can see many geysers and small volcanoes, and as we know, Mustafar is a volcanic planet. So, in my opinion, these volcanoes must have caused Red Planet to transform into Mustafar, or maybe some other kind of catastrophe, not necessarily a natural one. Perhaps the peaks themselves caused the disaster by over-exploring Red Planet, leading it to the self-destruction and eventually turning it into Mustafar. Well, but let's move on from those planets and let's move on to the next argument. Because otherwise we could explain all planets in AngryBirds space as AngryBirds Star Wars planets. But I won't go into that in this episode because maybe I will leave that for the next theory. But well, let's move on to the next argument. As we can see in AngryBirds Star Wars, there is a stellar species appear in AngryBirds Star Wars. It's a Padme Amidala and her daughter Leia. But we won't see Stella in AngryBirds space. So you're probably asking me where Stella species came from, since there is no Stella in AngryBirds space. Well, we have to go to AngryBirds Reloaded chapter space, because you can see in chapter titled Wingularity, because from a crystal comes out the Scarlet Wing, which is Stella, in her space version. As we can see, her powers are identical to the powers of Leia from AngryBirds Star Wars. But it isn't only case when it comes to proving my theory. Apart from the same powers, we can see the same as descendants of Super Red. That is similarity in powers and in growing hair. As we can see, Padme and Leia have hair, but Scarlet Wing doesn't have hair. There's the same explanation that descendants, as a result from a space radiation, got hair. But well, let's move on to the next character, what's look like Matilda. In chapter Expansion Theory, we can see Ironbeard, which is modeled on Matilda. And in AngryBirds Star Wars, we also have one beard modeled on Matilda. It's C-3PO. You're probably asking me, who built Ironbeard from AngryBirds Reloaded? Well, most likely it's a pigs, just like they built the egg-searching robot. So probably later they built Ironbeard. Well then, why they put Ironbeard into the cage? So at this moment, I don't have any answer for this question yet. But I will try to explain it in the future episode of this series. The same way why Scarlet Wing was frozen in crystal, but it will be probably answered in the next update of AngryBirds Reloaded chapter space, as well as space version of Hulk from the skin. But well, before we finish this theory, let's answer one more question. What happened to the characters from AngryBirds space, such as Super Red, Lightning Beards, Promise Bubbles, Space Bomb, Incredible Terrence, Icebeard and Laserbeard. Are they still alive? It seems to me they are not only alive, but they are also fine. At least we know that about Laserbeard and Icebeard are alive. As for the confirmation of the others, we have no evidence are they living or they died. So, we can see Laserbeard in cinematic trailer for AngryBirds Star Wars, as he sits in cantina and clearly seems he's chilling out there. Also, we can see him in two scenes. In first, we see him full, and in second one, we only can see his hair next to the table. But what about Icebeard? Since we know the Laserbeard is sitting in the cantina, you will probably see the explanation of why he is sitting in the canteen in future episodes, because I have a one theory about it. But let's move on. What happened to Icebeard in this case? We can see Icebeard in the short story film about Boba Fett. We can see it in Boba Fett Delivery, as Boba taking out Icebeard from carbonite freezer. But why when Boba takes out Icebeard from carbonite freezer, Icebeard act like was completely unaffected, even didn't doing anything when Boba Fett throws him out? And why Icebeard was in the carbonite freezer before? Well, I have a theory for that. What if I told you that the carbonite freezer works on Icebeard powers? Or more specifically, he is doing the freezing himself, and this is just his new job. And his behavior is caused by a shock, because Han Solo, which he freezes, reminds him Chuck before he was turned into Laserbeard after jumping into the portal, and probably because of that, Icebeard got shocked, and that's why Boba Fett was surprised that the first thing he took out was Icebeard. Probably the freezer worked like this: when a hostage or person sentenced to freezing are put in this freezer, Icebeard is coming out and freezes him, and after that, Icebeard should come back where he came from. But this time, Icebeard got shocked and he didn't come back where he came from, and that's why he was taken out by Boba Fett. So, why they don't fight alongside our protagonist against the Empire? Well, I think their fight was over. They did what they had to do. Offspring are alive and feel well. It hurts. They defeated their main enemy. Or what about the King of the Pigs? Are he and Emperor are the same person? In my opinion, they are not. I think that King of Pigs is dead and Emperor is his descendant. You're probably asking me how the King Smooth Cheeks died. Well, that I will show you in the next theory, what will you soon see on our channel. But at the end of this theory, I have one explanation for you. How in AngryBirds Space fight is during over the X, that AngryBirds Star Wars 2 is a fight about revenge. Imperial revenge on the Birds for the death of his father, or one of the more distant ancestors. Goal of Emperor was probably to reduce the entire species to zero, which failed. But we are not sure if it was definitely mean to be to zero. Maybe it was just some other task to defeat Bird heroes. Who knows? We only seen Executive Order 66 by pig clones on the Bird Jedi. And in AngryBirds Star Wars 1, the plot is to defeat the Empire and restoring the peace in galaxy and save the space from evil pigs again. And that would be everything for this episode. I think I have adequately proven that AngryBirds Space is a prequel to AngryBirds Star Wars Saga. But for now, I thank you for watching this episode. If you want to know more AngryBirds theories, feel free to subscribe our channel and also to subscribe channel Stanislav and AngryBird04. And also, I invite you to watch them videos about this theory. They may not delve into it as much as I do, but I think it's worth to watch it too. The links you have in the description. See you in next videos. Said by Shade.